Hello everyone, good evening and a very warm welcome to the 36th Masterclass of Practical Cities. Practical Cities is an initiative by a group of young urban practitioners aimed at having conversations around the urban realm with grassroots level urban practitioners, academicians, municipal officers, local vendors to make our cities more livable and sustainable. Today, Practical Cities is pleased to have a young practitioner, Ms. Rashmita Jadav, an architect and landscape architect currently based in Germany, with us to share her knowledge and learnings. Welcome, Rashmita.
Hi.
Yes, so going forward, let me introduce Ms. Rashmita Jadav to you all. Rashmita holds a Bachelor's of Architecture degree from CEPT University, Ahmedabad, and Master's of Landscape Architecture degree from Anhalt University of Applied Sciences, Germany. Besides professional work, she engages herself dearly in the local community gardening and conducting training sessions for organic kitchen, gardening, and toxin-free living. In the span of 10 years, she has worked in the areas of architecture, urban planning, landscape architecture, architecture conservation, as well as academics. A bachelor's thesis, Understanding the Morphology of Laytown, was published as a book by CEPT University in 2012. After this vast exposure of professional work, she has chosen to work in the area of climate adaptive planning. Animal-aided design and industrial landscape architecture are her areas of interest in the fight against climate emergency. At present, she works in a landscape architecture studio in Ismaning, Munich, where she is primarily involved in designing nature gardens. Thank you, Rashmita, for joining us today. So,
It's always, yeah.
Sorry. Yes, thank you for joining us. So, as we all know, today's masterclass is currently under the theme of climate change and disaster mitigation. And Ms. Rashmita Jadav has chosen to speak on animal-aided design, restoring biodiversity in urban fabric. So to begin, I would like to start with the question. I would like to understand, how can one best explain biodiversity in an urban fabric? Because that is not what we usually talk about, right? Biodiversity is green, away from cities, somewhere in forests. So how do we explain biodiversity in urban fabric?
First of all, hi Chetan and the team Practical Cities. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and talk whatever little I know about the area in animal-aided design. Okay, so coming to your question, biodiversity is nothing but every living being and the varieties of it. It exists across the globe. We are also part of it. And when we talk about urban biodiversity, so in cities or village, with human, whatever animal species, plant species that live with us in co-relationship is in simple terms called biodiversity of urban fabric. And our lecture today or masterclass today is really going to talk about it. And I hope it can help whoever is listening to this masterclass.
Yeah, so with that, thank you. And let's dive straightly into the presentation. Over to you.
Yeah. So, okay. So animal-aided design is, as you've already explained, it is a very important tool of restoring biodiversity in urban fabric. Why R is because it's a trademark definition developed by two professors in Technical University in Munich, Professor Dr. Thomas Hauck and Professor Dr. Wolfgang Weisser. Now let's understand first of all what biodiversity is. We all talk about biodiversity. We all talk about climate change, what is happening around the world. And to fight the climate crisis, this word is nowadays used pretty vastly. So biodiversity is nothing but biological diversity, and it is what Britannica says in crux. It is the variety of life found in a place on Earth, or often the total variety of life on Earth. So it is the variety of life on Earth, that is biodiversity. So as I said, we are fighting climate change, or the climate crisis, as now people say. There are SDG rules across the globe. People are coming together to discuss how we can better our Earth and fight this global phenomena. So let's understand what are the basic drivers that are the root cause of the biodiversity loss. First of all, it's the habitat loss of animal species. So when we are growing cities, the habitats for plants or other animal species other than human are being lost. Invasive species. For an example, the bower, or the baboon tree is also a species that was brought in by the Britishers to sort of green the desert, but it has now become an invasive species in India. Then over-exploitation of any natural resources. What happens is we take from nature, but then other than human, there are animal species, birds that rely upon these sources. And when they can't have the resources, naturally they are going to go away. The pollution and the climate change that is associated with global warming. So these are basic drivers of biodiversity loss. Why biodiversity is important? I will just put in simple words. It is important for the environmental and human well-being. If the environment is good, the human health will be good. And that's the basic thing why we need to preserve biodiversity. Okay, now again, let's try to understand what influences the biodiversity loss. So as I said before, human population growth. At present, human population across the globe is about 7.9 billion. And it is projected that by 2050, it will be around 9 billion. And this growth has jumped in within last 50 years or 60 years. Naturally, when we have more human population, we are going to consume things. And the consumption has increased not directly related to the human population. Yes, that is there, but our needs. We are consuming products and resources that are our leisure, that are for our leisure. So again, the burden is on the nature. And of course, when we use the resources, are also going to someday they will get lost, right? So reduced resources efficiency. These are main three influences of biodiversity loss, I would say. Now, there are many tools globally. Educational institutes, practitioners, they all are architects, urban designers, landscape architects. They all are talking about how can we work towards this biodiversity loss and can make our cities better, so our health is better and the environment is better. So there are two professors, as I had already talked to you about. These are two professors of Technical University in München. One professor is related to landscape architecture, and the other comes from a biological background. When they were teaching students about landscape architecture, they realized that the students only talk about the plants, but not in relationship with the animal species that they support. And here I would like to emphasize that plants and animal species, they live in co-relationship. You can't separate one from the other. And then they develop this, based on this ideology that they believed in, they developed this animal-aided design. And they are doing amazing work in Germany. And also they have some association with university across the globe. So what does this animal-aided design does? First of all, let's understand the life cycle of any animal species. So any living being goes through a life cycle. It requires food, it requires to procreate, it requires to give birth. And then some animal species go in hibernation. Now, as humans, we do this very, very easily because we have all our resources. We are the most superior species. I would say that. But other animal species, they are very sensitive to their environment. And because these cities are increasing and their habitats are getting smaller and smaller, this process is sort of broken. If somebody wants, gets an area for food, but doesn't get an area for birth or procreation, doesn't work. If some animal species get everything, but there is no there's no provision for hibernation, then of course that animal species, after coming to a certain life cycle, it will die. So let's go ahead and understand what tools we can use to sort of, first of all, introduce, sustain, and restore biodiversity with the help of the tools that are explained in animal-aided design. So first of all, we all know trees. Trees support birds, small mammals, and insects. And it also, we know that they help in making our environment better by providing us oxygen, reducing the heat island effect in the cities, and etc., etc. Then there are hedges and shrubs. They are very critical in because they house tiny birds like sparrows or swallows, small mammals like rats sometimes, or hedgehogs. And of course, it's again a house of insects. Then wildflower meadows. This is very, very important. As I go ahead, we'll talk more about it. But wildflower meadows are nothing but unkempt land where no human hindrance has been made. The flowers grow by themselves. They are annuals, biannuals, or perennial flowers. They most likely are local flower species, so they support the local fauna. And primarily their task is to support the pollinators and insects. Then we have stones, boulders, pebbles. In their crevices, insects really kind of get their heaven, I would say. When it's too cold outside, they can go inside, hibernate. When it's too hot outside, they can again go hibernate. So stones, any types of stone, any form of stone is again very important to have in our surrounding. And so sandwich. I'm sure some of you would have seen sparrows doing some sand bath. Sand is very important because it supports the particular life cycle of a particular animal species. For an example, birds, it helps them sunbathing, sand bathing, sorry. For insects, it helps in laying their eggs. And reptiles, we know that reptiles also sometimes find their home in sand. Then insect hotels. This phenomena I found a little new. It could be an old phenomena, but sometimes what happens is that when there is a scarcity of providing habitat or place to live for insects, these sort of boxes like bird houses, which we see all around, are put with different kinds of holes, with different lengths of holes, because many insects live, or bees live, in communities. Some bees are really, they are single, they are not social, they live single. Some bees are social, so they live in community, like honeybees. So insect hotels is also one very important and useful tool for animal aided design. Then bird houses, we know this is again a really helpful tool to let the birds come and then lay eggs and then procreate. And what I have personally seen is that one bird box can host 2 to 3 cycles. I mean to say that 2 to 3 bird families per year can lay eggs and have their babies. Then bee boxes. This is also I see a lot in Germany, and this is particularly for honeybees. Of course, there are other bees, they also come and can stay here, but these are used primarily for honeybees. And what happens is these honeybee boxes, the bee boxes, are kept near the farms, or sometimes on top of roofs, and they have a radius of, or they cover area of about 3 miles, 2 to 3 miles, and sometimes they go beyond 7-8 miles to sort of get their food. And in the process, we know that the pollination happens. So this has again proved a very good tool to sort of have our in our surroundings animal species. Then in India, this is really not a problem. Most of our houses have flat roofs. And on flat roofs, there's something called intensive roofs and extensive roofs. That means that on flat roofs or sloping roofs, nowadays that technology, that even on sloping roofs, there some ground cover species are planted that requires least amount of maintenance and can survive throughout the year. This phenomena was developed in Germany, and it is legally when now it is in practice that if you have your car garage, you have to have extensive extensive green roof over that. So what's the difference? Let me just quickly tell you. Intensive green roof means that you get only 2 to 5 centimeter bed, and on that you have to plant species like sedum, for an example, and it grows on its own. It's like it just thrives on its own, even without water sometimes. And extensive roofs is where you sort of have a larger thickness, and then you can plant more bigger species or flower species, but then you have to maintain it. So these two kinds of green roof tools are also very helpful. What it does is, because there is very little human hindrance in that area, pollinators can spend their life cycle there, and it requires zero maintenance, and it also is good for the health of the building. It also again helps in decreasing the heat island effect of the city, and it also helps in reducing the power consumption in terms of AC, air conditions we have. So it is environmentally beneficial. It helps pollinator and insects. Then twigs and dry leaves. This phenomena is across the globe, that when the tree falls in the autumn or in the season, where on roads or on ground, everywhere you see dry leaves, and we immediately want to get rid of them. Dry leaves and twigs are really, really helpful, because they support certain kinds of fungus, insects that feed on them, and small mammals that sort of hide themselves or hibernate themselves in that. Especially in Germany, the small twigs are a perfect home for hedgehogs. So these are also really important tools. But then, of course, we do not want to see our garden so littered with dry leaves and twigs. We can use dry leaves as mulch, so it protects our soil, and in addition, it improves the whole health of the soil and supports the biodiversity, the micro organisms. Sorry. And then there is water bodies. These water bodies are, I would say, they are the star of the restoring of biodiversity, because they support many kinds of amphibians, reptiles, birds, mammals, invertebrates, and insects again. Additionally, when you have a water body, which is a shallow water body, you can have plants that can thrive in water and in moist situations. So this means that the variety of plants and variety of animal species. So I give you an overall idea about the tools. Now let's understand how can we put them in use of our projects. So we have, suppose, green space or a barren space. Then we introduce the trees and plants and activities, which leads to biodiversity. Then in third stage, if we add wetland area or the water body, it enriches the biodiversity. And in the fourth stage, what we can do is expand this biodiversity. We can make such islands, and then we understand how we can spread it to our neighborhood. And therefore, let's go ahead and understand. So these are ideal, I would say, or the ideas I would like to give, that there are habitats. Some habitats have no connections, they are far apart. Some habitats have functional connectivity, and some connectors, some habitats are connected with structural connectivity. Let me tell you what it means. It means that there are patches, stepping stones, and green corridors. Why is this important? Because the animal species require habitat, as I've already explained to you before. And in these patches, sometimes what happens is they cannot fulfill their whole life cycle. Like I said, that if they get everything, they don't know where to hibernate. If they get everything, they don't get enough support to get their food or mate, or where to go. For an example, there are birds that go perch on the top of the tree, and they are their roosting places, they are nesting places, they all are different species. Then functional connectivity means that the species who is willing to go to point A to B by stepping or by going through patches that are very sparse in their resources. But then there are some species that are very shy. If they don't have their how would I say, if they don't have their protection layer, they would not go to from point A to point B, and that's where the structural connectivity. This is bare minimum, and so these are the tools. So for any habitat to get connected, there are patches, there are stepping stones, and there are green corridors. Now, patches, stepping stones, green corridors, they all depend what species it is. For an example, if we talk about the large mammals such as elephant, the patch for it will be huge. Then the patch for, let's say, a rat, or let's say a bee or a species of butterfly. Similarly, stepping stones. So these are all relative phenomena, but the ideology is the same. And when we kind of put all this together, there is a system that is developed. And when this system does not join from one point to the point B, from point A to point B, then the whole system collapses, and that species is in danger, or from that particular part, the species will go away. So what should we do as designers, or as even a citizen, as a human? What can we do? We can plant trees where we realize that, oh, for an example, in my society, there are not enough trees, or maybe there is an area where I find that there could be more trees, or there was a tree that was fallen, or something happened. We can always plant trees, and that can make that patch whole. So it's called buffering. Then stepping stones. For stepping stones, it's called bridging. There are patches that a species, while going from point A to B, can go to. But if the distance is so large, that species will not be willing to go from point A to point B. And that's where we introduce another patch, which is called a stepping stone. So when we have stepping stones, it's called bridging. It's like jumping from one point to the other. And then the corridors. What happens, sometimes we see that, oh, there was a huge green buffer going through a city or a neighborhood. And then we see there's something happened, and then there was a break in it. So when there are corridors, we try to make connections by planting tree of that particular species of animals that they support. And when this happens, we get a continuity in developing biodiversity in our neighborhood. And we have just talked about how it looks in plan, but biodiversity is much complex than what we just talked about. Of course, there are kind of species, there are kind of animals. Then there are, for an example, a simple example, when we talk about butterflies, butterfly is one kind of animal, but there are numerous types of species. In butterfly, what happens is a particular butterfly of a particular species. There is one type of butterfly, but there are many species in it. Their host plants are particular. Their food, from some butterflies feed on rotten fruits. Some butterflies feed on flowers. So if butterfly, one type of animal, has so much of variety as to what plant they would prefer, then there are so many kinds of animals. So when we talk about a green patch, on the edge it's different, on the middle it's different, and in the center it's different. If we go to a jungle, what we see on the edge of the jungle is not we see in the center of the jungle. When we go to, let's say, see a tiger or whichever wild animal we want to go and see, we are always told that we'll have to go deep into the jungle. So animals also have their own particular habitat where they would like to have. So there is a sectional complexity, of course. And in urban scenario, it is still manageable because we know mostly we know what kind of animal species are around us. And we, as landscape architects or zoologists or people who know a little better about the animal species and flora and fauna both, we can, with urban designers, urban planners or architects, can develop or propose to develop a condition where we can have varieties of animal species. So biodiversity, and that's how it's done. We should avoid creating mono conditions for particular for one type of animal species. We can increase this. Developing biodiversity in urban scenario is, I would say, a work in progress. So it always one has to always keep adding layers, keep adding layers. And then it looks like this. So there is metrics. Metrics is for the activities that humans do on Earth. So agricultural fields, our cities are metrics. Then we have patches, and from one patch to the other patch, we can either connect by stepping stones or a green corridor. And this is what it should do in our cities. And let's now talk about some examples that have really helped in restoring biodiversity. This is one quarry in Timba in Gujarat. This was a basalt quarry, and from the scale you can see it was a huge quarry. And between 1977 to 1985, it was developed as a lake by Mrs. Prabhakar V. Bhagwat. And over the years, of course, there were triggers to this, that they planted some species that would survive in this harsh climate, not climate, I would say condition, because there are no trees here. This absolutely barren. And considering the soil type, they introduced some native species, and then it gradually grew. There were some trees introduced. Then the water from the nearby river poured into it. The rainwater came into it. And then this is what it looks like. And this was a photo taken about 7-8 years ago. And this is what it looks like. Then by Pradeep Krishan in 2006, this park was developed in Jaipur. Again, this Jaipur, it's desert, it was a barren land. And here what Pradeep Krishan did was native plants, only native plants were used in developing this bag. And of course, when we do any landscape with native plants, the native species that they are being supported by these plants will come, and then the whole cycle will again start. This is 𝐀𝐬𝐿 Park in Germany, west part of Germany. It's called 𝐀𝐬𝐿 Landscape Park. It was an area of so many industries, coal minings, and it was so bad that the people started moving out of this area. This is about 450 square kilometers area. And from 1989, the government decided to close many coal mines and the industries. And what to do with those industrial buildings and mines? So they are developing it into a nature park. So there are trails, there are jungles developed in it, there are trails for biking, hiking, there are lakes developed here. And so they are developing this huge 85 kilometers long patch into a biodiversity hub. This is one industrial building in 𝐀𝐬𝐿 Landschaftspark, and this particular is located in Duisburg. This is how it looks. Latz & Partner, it's a very well-known landscape architecture company which developed this, and it's amazing to see how they have reused this building and have turned it into sort of a jungle. Apart from this, of course, government does its own efforts, but then there are institutes in Germany that have taken initiative. This is a Free University in Berlin. It has developed a program called Blooming Campus. What happens in here is that the university has a large patch of green area. Usually the green area is mowed, but here what is happening is they let the green take over. Of course, they maintain a little, but they do not use any electrical mowing machines. Instead, they use the hand scythe with which they sort of cut, I think, once a year before winter. And otherwise, throughout the year, the native plants keep blooming, and they just keep feeding the pollinators and insects. Then there are some farmers who kind of dedicate patches for wildflowers, wild native flowers, next to their fields, which again helps in their crop cycles. And this is all we talked about on a larger scale, but when we talk about urban fabric, it eventually comes down on us. What are we homes, around our homes and in our cities? Because we need animals for us to survive. So with this, I would like to thank everybody for your attention, and back to Chetan.
Yes, thank you, Rashmita, for this wonderful presentation. Actually, it was an eye opener for me, and I feel our audience also feels the same today, with so many examples and simple outcomes that, as you showed, like how the changes have happened over time. And moving forward, you can stop your screen sharing so we can go on to faces. As you mentioned, like we in our own neighborhoods, in our urban fabrics can actually take this forward. But how can any concerned citizen or move forward? Can they do something, take those small steps for urban biodiversity restoration in their own neighborhoods, not maybe just in their houses, but some lands around, empty pockets that they see around? Is there any way? And what can be the problems that they might face in doing so?
Yeah. Okay, it's a small question, but there's a lot that I would like to say. So biodiversity means we have to start with the plants, because without the plants, we will not have animals or animal species, I would say. And so it starts with our house. This is what my belief is, that first of all, you have to engage yourself in small acts, such as when you are at your home, you make your own compost, right? When you make your own compost, then you will be encouraged to grow one plant or take care of one plant, right? Then you share this knowledge or the happiness of what you are doing in the betterment of the environment, because we cannot segregate biodiversity from environment. And gradually, when you share it with your colleagues or friends or neighbors, then they will get together. And suppose you all are on that level, maybe you propose that there is a society patch where I would like to grow trees, or would like to do something for biodiversity. Then you decide which trees to plant. For an example, a lay or anybody who doesn't have enough knowledge about this field will not know. But then there are a couple of trees. So for an example, okay, I know the Gujarati names. Okay, so the neem tree is there, the bargat ka ped, the people ped, and there are so many varieties we have. Rain trees, we should grow such trees, and we should not grow trees which are fast growing, because the trees that grow fast, they die fast. So for an example, chandan ka ped, it takes years, you would have heard, that it takes years to grow, but then when it's grown, it's there, right? And it supports so many species. So we should learn from our environment. I would say that that's the best way to do. Learn from our environment and understand which trees are our own trees, which flowering plants are own plants. And then maybe in one corner you can grow a bunch of flower plants, and then there in the shadow you can make a small puddle of water where it's protected, or a sand bed where the birds or the insects, they would like to have their own nice time. So this is what gradually, like I said, developing biodiversity is a work in progress. So gradually, one step after the other. And yeah, that's what basically I do. I dearly do that. I at the first stage, I try to encourage people to make compost and take care of a tulsi plant, and then it goes ahead.
That's a very nice idea of like when you create a compost, because it's of your own origin, you start caring about the compost and what to do with it is invested to it, a plant. And then you start taking care of one plant to the other and spread the news, spread the awareness, and the community of it grows by itself. That's a very good outcome today that I see. My next question is like, many times it is seen that when it comes down to adaptation and even mitigation about climate studies, usually our studies focus only on, they are usually human-centric. And so how do you think this limitation of perspective can be addressed? Like, as you are practicing in the similar space, I would like to learn from you, are there any objectives that you see that are hindering this perspective? Because most of the times we talk about humans and what humans will get out of it. How can this change?
Yeah, it's again a very important question, and this is also my main, I would say, concern about the way the professionals think. What happens is that when we are architects, we only think about buildings. When we are urban planners or designers, we think about revenue generation or how can we give best life to human.
Yeah, this professional hats.
Yes, yes. And when I come from this landscape architecture background, because I have seen, luckily I have seen all the professional, how would I say, I've touched based on the moods of all the professional ways of working. So what happens, what you should do when there is me first, human first approach is there in our society, we should open ourselves a little bit, I would say. For an example, what happens in India is that when an architect gets an opportunity to design a garden, he would grab it. And then he would plant she would plant trees that are not native, that she has seen somewhere else. So it is nothing wrong in architects or urban designers practicing or designing gardens or landscape patches, but if they educate themselves that what is native, that will make a lot of difference, I would say. And when one starts to design, especially in terms of for the urban designers, who are very important, I believe that their role in designing our neighborhoods is really a key role. If they sort of open up about this nature a little bit, I think a lot of problems will start being solved at the design stage. Not like ghar ban gaya, abhi garden banao. I hope I made myself clear in that.
Yes, very much. So that's the perspective change that is required from the professionals themselves at the stage of design. That itself will change the conversation.
Yeah.
And then coming to my last question, because you touched the part of professions, specifically about architects, urban designers, planners, and roles of landscape architects. So I want to talk about these young professionals who might not be from these professions. They are urban managers, urban planners. There are many other urban roles like sociologists, all of these. And if they are interested in animal-aided designs, like restoring biodiversity in the urban fabric, how can they begin? How can they begin their journey? And is there any material available, like formal studies available in this particular area or principles? And or is it just the practice, hands-on learning kind of process? Or they're a mix of two? How would you take that? Because I think many of our urban professionals who have joined us today would like to know if they want to get involved professionally into this. How can that roll out for them?
Yeah. So thank you for the question once again. I would say it's a mix of everything. when somebody wants to learn, luckily we have the SDG goals, where it talks about biodiversity. You can go on the website and can read about it. And particularly for animal-aided design, it is a website. You can visit the website and you can educate yourself about how it is done, because it is a new field. A lot of PhDs are being done. A lot of postdoctorate studies are being done. And these are the kinds of fields that are not bound just for the architects or the urban designers or the landscape architects. It is an interdisciplinary study, I would say, because when we are talking about biodiversity and animal-aided design, there is a sociological aspect of animals. So in that sense, one can observe around in terms of nature and environment. And for scientific studies, there are this particular website which is available, and you can educate yourself further.
Yes, then that was actually my last question, and you've taken all the questions answered them very particularly. So thank you. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and like an eye-opening session today. Because many times when we talk about climate change, disaster mitigation, it's so human-centric. It's so, it's so minuscule as an idea to reach out to human needs and then talk about biodiversity and involve species, not just animals, to say species around us, and involve everything, starting from trees to animals to insects, everything as you covered today, like a small world within itself.
So I just wanted to add, and this is what my problem was, because when I did architecture, as an architect, I got opportunity to work on large scale projects, also on environmental projects, but I wasn't equipped enough to understand the other part of the biodiversity or the plants. We know there are problems, but how to solve it? And that was one of the reasons which sort of led me to landscape architecture, and then eventually to get more involved in this animal-aided design and biodiversity. So yeah, there's never late.
Yes, thanks to you that this new area of studies is now open to us, and we would like to engage with that and engage with you also. I would also like Rashmita to share a few links that she talked about today, so that I can share them in our chat sections for our audiences to visit them. And yes, thank you, and very thank you again for this entire session. And also thanks to all our viewers who have joined us and stayed so long to learn from it. I would like them to urge them to, if they liked what they learned today, they would want to share it with your friends, colleagues, and also with all of these people who would be interested in such materials. And to learn about practical cities more, you can always watch all our masterclasses, even this one. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and other like Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. You can follow us there. And thank you once again to Ms. Rashmita for your time. Have a safe weekend and happy week. Yes, thank you.